June 1940. A converted M3 Grant tank sits inside a locked compound on Salisbury Plain, England. Its original turret has been removed. In its place sits a low, cylindrical steel drum, featureless except for a narrow vertical slit 2 inches wide. No gun barrel. No obvious weapon. Nothing to indicate what it could do. It looked like a tank with its head cut off, but at night, aimed at an enemy line 1,000 yards away. This machine could project 13 million candle power of blinding, flickering white light across a wall 340 yards wide. It could disorient every German soldier within its beam, destroy their depth perception, prevent their eyes from adjusting, and render them unable to aim, move, or think clearly. Infantry could advance through corridors of organized darkness between the beams, invisible and protected. The men behind the light were armoured. The men caught inside it were helpless. It was one of the most innovative weapons Britain produced in the entire war. Over 655 were built. Thousands of soldiers trained on it for years. An entire brigade was formed around it. Locked away from the world, forbidden to speak of what they did, and it was almost never used. Its designation was the Canal Defence Light, and it was a weapon so secret that secrecy itself became its greatest enemy. To understand why the Canal Defence Light existed, you need to understand the problem Britain faced when Commander Oscar de Thoren of the Royal Navy first raised his hand in 1915. He proposed mounting powerful searchlights on armoured vehicles to illuminate the nighttime battlefield, protect advancing infantry, and blind the enemy line. The idea was not complicated. The potential was enormous. The War Office rejected it. They rejected it again in 1922. De Thoren refused to disappear. By 1933, he had assembled a private civilian syndicate to develop and sell the technology independently. The group had 4 members. De Thoren provided the original concept. Albert Victor Marcel Mitzakis, a British citizen of Greek descent, served as manager and chief technical designer. Major General John Frederick Charles Fuller, one of Britain's foremost theorists of armoured warfare, lent his tactical credibility to the project, and Hugh Grosvenor, the second Duke of Westminster, provided the funding. Fuller's involvement deserves one honest note. He was simultaneously a member of Oswald Mosley's British Union of Fascists and attended Hitler's 50th birthday celebrations in Berlin in 1939. His political sympathies later excluded him from active wartime service entirely. A demonstration for the French military in 1934 was rejected outright. The prototype's exposed searchlight was deemed too fragile for any real battlefield. A second, improved trial at Châlons-en-Champagne in France in 1936 attracted British War Office observers. A further demonstration on Salisbury Plain in February 1937 was persuasive enough to secure an order for 3 test systems. Then, on the night of June 7 and 8, 1940, a decisive final trial took place at Lulworth in Dorset. 10 days later, with France collapsing and a German invasion of Britain a genuine possibility, the War Office took over the programme entirely and ordered 300 projector turrets. From that moment, the Canal Defence Light, known to its crews simply as the Gizmo, became one of the most classified programs in British military history. The engineering inside that anonymous cylindrical turret was extraordinary. At the heart of the system sat a carbon arc lamp rated at 13 million candle power. 2 carbon electrodes were placed together, drawn apart, and the arc that formed between them burned at temperatures exceeding 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The resulting light struck a parabolic primary reflector that gathered and shaped the beam, which was then redirected by a flat-polished aluminum secondary reflector toward the turret face. There, it exited through a vertical slit just 2 inches wide and 24 inches tall. That narrow slit was the system's masterstroke. The small aperture made the internal optics almost immune to incoming fire. Bullets and shrapnel striking the exterior barely reduced light intensity at all. The beam that emerged had a horizontal spread of 19 degrees and a vertical spread of 1.9 degrees. At 1,000 yards, this produced a lit corridor 340 yards wide by 34 yards high, an enormous wash of light from an opening barely wider than a human palm. But the Canal Defence Light's most diabolical feature was not the brightness. It was the shutter. A mechanical shutter built into the slit could open and close up to twice per second. This flickering prevented the human eye from adapting to either light or darkness. It destroyed depth perception. It made range estimation impossible. It caused disorientation and nausea in anyone caught within the beam. Tests demonstrated that trained soldiers could not aim their weapons accurately, could not judge distances, and could not coordinate movement under its effect. Meanwhile, troops advancing in the darkened corridors between crossing beams were entirely concealed, moving through organized darkness while the enemy was paralyzed by light. Color filters added another layer of deception. Blue filters made the CDL appear farther away than it actually was. Amber filters made it appear closer. Two CDL tanks crossing their beams with different filters produced combined white light, while individually distorting German perception of range and direction from separate angles simultaneously. The British initially fitted CDL turrets to the Matilda II infantry tank, but this configuration stripped the vehicle of all main armament, leaving a crew of 4 with a searchlight and nothing else to fight with. From 1943, the M3 Grant became the primary platform. The Grant's critical advantage was its hull-mounted 75mm gun, which remained fully intact after the CDL turret was fitted. This meant that a Grant CDL was not just a searchlight vehicle, it was a fighting tank that also happened to carry an unprecedented illumination capability. To disguise its true purpose, a dummy 37mm gun barrel was bolted to the CDL turret exterior. Each vehicle carried a 9.5 kilowatt auxiliary generator to power the arc system continuously in the field. The secrecy surrounding the CDL training program was, in retrospect, the weapon's fatal flaw, and it is worth understanding exactly how that flaw developed before we get to how the CDL actually performed in combat. Now, before we get into where the Canal Defence Light fought, if you are finding this deep dive into British wartime engineering worth your time, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps the channel grow. The name Canal Defence Light was chosen deliberately to sound boring. Anyone encountering it in documents would assume it referred to routine searchlight emplacements for protecting the Suez Canal. Nothing to investigate. The Americans added further layers of obfuscation. The tank was designated T-10 Shop Tractor. The vehicle codename was Leaflet. The training program was codenamed Cassock. Turrets leaving the factory were labelled Coast Defence Turrets. No single factory workforce ever understood the complete weapon they were building. The American Locomotive Company in Schenectady, New York, modified the M3 hulls. The Press Steel Car Company in New Jersey built the turrets. Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois handled final assembly. Each facility saw only its own fragment. At Fort Knox, Kentucky, CDL troops were isolated in a restricted compound called Area X. Mail was censored. Enlisted men could not leave unless in groups of 5, accompanied by a sergeant. Some families, receiving no letters for weeks, feared their sons were under military arrest. At Camp Bouse, Arizona, built in August and September of 1943, in the remote Butler Valley surrounded by mountains on all sides, roughly 10,000 troops trained through 1944. A full hospital was constructed on site so no soldier would ever require treatment outside the perimeter. Gold miners working nearby claims were driven away by overhead target practice. Soldiers who approached the checkpoints unescorted were turned back at gunpoint. Leaking information on the CDL reportedly guaranteed imprisonment under the Espionage Act of 1917. The raw power of a full training squadron was staggering. 16 CDL tanks operating together produced light intense enough that a newspaper could reportedly be read in the town of Penrith, 5 miles from the British training site at Lowther Castle in Cumbria. Winston Churchill witnessed one unintentional demonstration of this power. During a display at Penrith, Brigadier Lipscomb of the 35th Tank Brigade had the lights switched off. After the formal demonstration concluded, Churchill began to walk away. Lipscomb rushed to switch them back on for a final impression. 6 beams of 13 million candle power each blazed back to life and illuminated the Prime Minister in the act of quietly relieving himself against a bush. The bitter irony of all this infrastructure and all this secrecy was captured in a single sentence by the United States Army General Board's post-war study number 52. Commanders were often forgotten and not drawn into strategic plans. The weapon designed to transform night warfare had been classified so thoroughly that the generals who could have ordered its use did not know it existed. The trap was perfect in its cruelty. Surprise was considered essential, so the CDL was kept secret. Because it was secret, planners did not include it in operations. Because planners did not include it, it was never used. Because it was never used, the secret was preserved indefinitely. 655 machines sat in locked compounds and waited for orders that did not arrive. The operational record of the Canal Defence Light is nearly heartbreaking in its thinness. The earliest documented use came on November 18, 1944, during Operation Clipper at the Geilenkirchen salient, when CDL vehicles provided indirect bounced illumination for mine-clearing flail tanks before dawn. It was useful. It was not remotely what the weapon had been designed to do. The defining episode came at Remagen in March 1945. On March 7th, American troops captured the Ludendorff Bridge intact, the first Allied crossing of the Rhine in the entire war. The 738th Tank Battalion Special had received 13 CDL tanks on March 1. They rushed them to the bridgehead to defend it against German night attack. What followed was the closest the Canal Defence Light ever came to its intended role. Hitler dispatched Otto Skorzeny, the German Special Forces commander, to destroy the bridge using combat frogmen equipped with closed-circuit breathing apparatus. On March 17th, 7 swimmers entered the Rhine 17 kilometers upstream, floating on oil drums in water 7 degrees Celsius, drifting silently toward the bridge under cover of darkness. The CDL beams found them. The flickering light hit the river surface. The swimmers lost depth perception and orientation. American military police closed in from both banks. The survivors were captured. A German officer taken prisoner shortly afterwards said, "We wondered what those lights were as we got the hell shot out of us." 3 companies of CDL tanks eventually patrolled the entire bridgehead perimeter. Their armoured turrets proved superior to conventional searchlights under German artillery bombardment because the turret could absorb direct hits and continue operating where an exposed lamp would have been destroyed. During Operation Plunder, the main Allied Rhine crossing on the night of March 23, 1945, B Squadron of the 49th Regiment provided CDL illumination for assault parties crossing at Ries. 1 Grant CDL was destroyed by enemy fire. It was the only CDL lost in combat during the entire war. From March 25 through April 6th, CDL tanks illuminated 5 Bailey bridges across the river, spotting 3 additional German frogmen, all captured, and numerous explosive-laden logs floated downstream by German engineers. On April 29, 1945, CDL tanks provided movement light for British and American forces crossing the Elbe River at Lauenburg and Blechard. That was the last time the Canal Defence Light fought. It had not been used on D-Day despite 2 American battalions being fully equipped by June of 1944. The 11th Royal Tank Regiment spent 1942 to 1943 deployed with CDL tanks in North Africa and the Middle East, training constantly and waiting for orders that never came. Not one engagement, not one night attack. The 35th Tank Brigade under Brigadier Lipscomb comprised roughly 6,000 personnel, all trained and all idle for the decisive years of the war. On paper, the Canal Defence Light had no direct rival in the Allied arsenal, because no other nation produced anything comparable at scale. The Soviet Union deployed 143 conventional searchlights at the Battle of Seelow Heights in April 1945, bouncing light off low cloud to illuminate German positions for attacking armour. The result was a serious tactical failure. German defenders used the reflected light to aim their weapons at the approaching Soviet tanks, turning the illumination directly against the side that had switched it on. CDL advocates argued that Seelow demonstrated precisely the danger of simple, undirected battlefield light, and that the CDL's organised dark corridors and disorientation effect would have produced a fundamentally different outcome. That argument was never tested in any major engagement. After the war, American planners briefly reconsidered a revised CDL fitted to an M4 Sherman hull. The project was cancelled when analysts calculated that 4 battalions of conventional searchlights could be fully equipped for the cost of 1 CDL tank battalion. The Korean War produced no revival. The weapon was finished. Only 2 Canal Defence Light tanks survive anywhere in the world. A Matilda II CDL sits at the Tank Museum in Bovington, Dorset, the sole surviving example of the original British variant. An M3 Grant CDL is preserved at the Cavalry Tank Museum at Ahmednagar in India, a relic of the 43rd Royal Tank Regiment's deployment for a planned invasion of Malaya that never took place when Japan surrendered first. Some of its last operational use came in 1946. When CDL vehicles assisted Calcutta police during communal riots. A searchlight tank designed to blind German soldiers on the Rhine ended its service managing civil disorder in Bengal, June 1940. A cylindrical turret sits on a tank in a locked compound on Salisbury Plain. The slitted face points into darkness. The arc lamp waits. The Canal Defence Light was mechanically demanding, requiring constant fuel consumption and carbon rod resupply during sustained operation. The M3 Grant platform was becoming obsolete by 1944. The full disorientation effect was most devastating against troops trained for daylight fighting, and performance in broken or heavily wooded terrain was limited. The weapon was designed for the open nighttime battlefield, and the war it actually fought was mostly fought in bocage cities and forests. And yet at Remagen it worked. German frogmen drifting silent in a freezing river were blinded and captured within minutes. A newspaper could be read 5 miles from a training field in the dark of Cumberland. In the Butler Valley of Arizona, 10,000 soldiers spent a full year mastering the art of weaponized light, waiting for a call that never came. The Canal Defence Light proved one principle above all others. Secrecy applied without discrimination does not protect a weapon. It buries it. A commander who does not know a weapon exists cannot ask for it, cannot plan around it, and cannot use it. The weapon becomes as invisible to its own side as it was meant to be to the enemy. Britain designed the Canal Defence Light. Britain classified it into paralysis. 655 machines, thousands of men, 4 nights of actual use. The weapon found its enemy not at the Rhine but in a filing cabinet. That is not misfortune. That is the